All right, hello again, everyone. Today I'm going to be starting from scratch, making the hull for the USS Leahy, which was requested by a friend of mine. Usual disclaimer, I am in no way, shape, or form a Fusion 360 professional, so this is just using tricks and tools that I've learned in my time fiddling around with it, and there's probably a simpler and faster way to do some of the things that I do, but again, I don't know how to do them. Also, another disclaimer, I am not a YouTube professional by any way, so the cuts in this video will probably be clunky and not smooth transitions at all. As I encounter errors that aren't working, I'm going to have to stop, figure out what's going on, and then come back and start recording again. But hopefully, I'll get you at least some basic tips and tricks to get you to be able to design your hull for your RC warship scaled to what you desire. So let's get started. The first thing I always start with is my drawings themselves. So I'm going to insert a canvas from my computer, and here I've got my drawings. So I'm going to use my master plan, and this is where you can choose which plane you want to put it on. So I'll use the ZY since it's labeled right, and I'll use that for the starboard side. So this is where I'm going to place it, and then we're going to scale it. So I know I want to make it 196, and I know that it's 533 feet. So after doing some math, I know that that's going to be 692 millimeters. So if you right click on the canvas that you made, and then you hit the calibrate button, you can come in here, and I'm just going to use this central point right here in the middle of the center line and the middle of that stern. And then I'm going to go to the bow and do the same thing right here at that point. Actually, we'll go to that point there. Center line right about there. And that is 1692. So now that we've entered that value here, you press enter, zoom out, and there is our 196 scale. So I'm going to just keep this entire plan up and use it, so then that way I can measure on the same point for each of the planes that I use it on for both the profile view and the overhead view. But this is the profile view, so now I'm going to right click and edit canvas again to then move it, and I'm going to move it up, and I'm going to align this water line here, or this, whatever this baseline is. We're going to use that baseline underneath the water line. And so we are almost lined up there. So need to come up. So we're at 250. Now I'll go 255, see what that does. Almost. 6, 7. 7 is too much, so 6.5. 256.5. That looks like we are lined up there. Bow as well. Looks like it's a little under over there. And how about over here? So it may not line up exactly perfectly, just because, when these are scanned, there may be slight errors. But as long as it's close enough, I zoom out here and I look at it. And yeah, that looks, let's try going up again, 257. Okay. Yep, I'm good with that, so we'll use that. Okay, so now we've got our profile view set to 196 scale. So now we're going to do our overhead view. So that's the XY plane. Again, insert canvas from my computer. XY plane. And we'll just make that bigger. I'm just clicking and dragging to get it bigger here. There we go. So now I can see it. But you'll also notice that it's turned the wrong direction because we want it facing that way. So we'll just grab this little wheel here and rotate it 90 degrees. Like that. We'll click OK. I'm going to name this overhead view. profile view, and right click the overhead view, again calibrate, and the same points as before. There, and there. 1692. Now both of these match, and I can right click, edit canvas, and I want to move it down this way. So that's 250. I'm going to go ahead and hide the profile view canvas for now so that I can see there's my axis line. Okay, so 250 will go 251. All right, and then we'll check how that runs down the length. Again, it might not necessarily be completely perfect, but we just want it to be close. So that's 251. How about 252? Oh, too much. All right, let's try 250.5. Okay, that's pretty good there. Looks a little off midships, but we'll worry about that later. And it's spot on the bow. All right, and then we'll click OK. So now we have our profile view and our overhead view. And because we just went from the origin there, everything should be lined up nice and pretty for us. Next thing that I want to do is to create an outline of the ship on the profile view. So I'll hide my overhead view just to get rid of the clutter, and we'll make that outline. So I'm going to stop the video here, and I'll come back once the outline is created and show you some tips to do with that after you've created the outline. Okay, for the hull outline, as you can see, I now have everything drawn up here. Try to use as few lines as possible just to keep it nice and smooth and not as choppy. So hopefully at the very end, when it becomes an actual solid object, there aren't a bunch of little transition lines. But a couple of tips here. As I'm making the sketch, I'm making sure that the 3D sketch option is off, so we're sketching only in 2D. Now that I have these frame separations plotted out, I'm going to go up to the trim function, and I'm going to use the trim function to clean these up so that only the hull itself is where these lines are. So that's one of the things I'm going to do. The other thing to notice too is that between these two frames, when I create a patch, I can either do a patch or a loft. I haven't decided yet. I'll figure out as I get closer. But this point right here, you're going to want a straight line going all the way across. So I'm just going to continue that out to the next frame separation. So then that way, when I actually go to create this patch, I have a full form to do that from. And then we'll patch in this little section afterwards and then continue on to this section. I'm also going to try something different this time with the bow, the sonar dome. So rather than using the drawings, which I'm going to put the frame drawings on here next, rather than using those, I'm going to try 3D modeling just the dome and then attaching that to the hull afterwards. So that's why you see I've left the keel line going straight through the sonar dome there, because I plan on making some adjustments to the actual frames. But again, I'm going through and I'm going to trim each of the frame separations. Once I'm done trimming, I'm going to come up to the modify and use break and come through here and I'm going to break. Again, each of these sections I want to be their own section when I'm going to be modeling with them later on. So I want to break them into smaller pieces. So as you can see, as I'm highlighting that single line, it's then breaking them at each of the frame separations. So then that way this is just going to be one solid patch. So I'm going to do that down the line as well to make sure that each of these frame sections are each in their own individual line. So see, now that I've broken that, this whole section is only comprised of this line, this line, this one, and this one. And of course I'm going to trim those. So I'll be back after I complete that. All right, hull outline is completed. Everything is broken up into separate sections, and I'm happy with that. Next, I'm going to do the overhead view because I want to do the main deck outline for half of the ship. So to do that, I'm going to start a new sketch. Well, first I'm going to turn off the profile view, turn on the overhead view, start a new sketch on the overhead plane here. And then just to make sure that everything is lining up correctly, I'm going to use the project function. So shortcut is P on the keyboard, which brings up project, or the other way you can do it is through create, project include, project. And so I'm going to project this bow point right there, as well as the stern point right here. There. And then I'm going to also project the frame separation points moving on down the line. Okay, now all those points are projected. And as you can see, looks like they're not necessarily lined up perfectly because the stern point here, which should go here, is actually over there. So let's go ahead and adjust that and see what happens. Actually, first let's test overhead view, right click, calibrate. Let's just try calibrating again, make sure it's the right size. Here. Here. 1692. Okay, looks like it is. So let's edit the canvas then, and I'm going to finish the sketch for now. So let's edit the canvas, and we will move it. Oh, cancel, not edit. Or yeah, okay, edit canvas, but I got to zoom out. There it is. So I'm going to click this arrow, and I know I need to move to the right, which is in the positive direction. So even if you zoom in and you can't see the arrows anymore, you'll still have the little number bar, which jumps around. It may be hard to find, but you can manually type in the increments of how you want to change. So let's try just 5 millimeters. Too much. 3, 2.5, 2, nope, 0.8. There we go. And how's it look on the other end? So this point here, the bullnose is actually, it looks like the main deck actually ends right here, so that's pretty close. So let's move it back just a bit. So we're at 2.8. Try 2.7. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. And then we'll just double check our line up here. Looks good there. And looks good there. Okay, so we made that adjustment to that canvas. We can go ahead and hide. Oops, let's label our sketch profile view. So we can hide that just to make it a bit clearer. And as you can see, we've got all the points projected then from that profile view onto the plane that we're sketching on now, which will be helpful. So now I'm going to edit this sketch. In order to get the sections that I create for the main deck here to match the sections that I created on the profile view, so the section here goes from this point to this point. So just like I did with the profile, I'm going to separate the overhead view as well with straight lines going from the projected points straight down and just going slightly past. Make sure they go out past midships. There we go. Going past the actual main deck, and then I'm going to go modify, move copy. I'm going to select this line. We're going to select create a copy because I don't want to get rid of it. I just want to move it. And then you can actually go move point to point, select this, move it there, done. Okay. And then we're just if you right click, it'll bring up this menu here, which allows you to redo the last order used. So I used repeat move copy, so I'm going to select that again. We're going to move this line, create copy, point to point. This point is going here. But I wanted to create a copy. There we go. So now it created a copy. Okay. So I'm going to do that all the way down the frames, and then I'm going to go back and using straight lines and fit points, whichever you prefer, just to try and get the shape correct of the main deck itself here. So in this case, I'll use a fit point spline, see if I can do it with 2. Adjust my tangent handles here. Right about, or no, that's wrong. So sometimes the drawings can be confusing. See, that's actually the nets there. So this is the main deck line going through the center there. So that's where I want this line to go. Right about there. Okay. Now we adjust. Follow that line tangent there. Okay. And this line, I know I want this to be horizontal and tangent there at the end, so I'm going to select the horizontal vertical, and I'm going to select that tangent handle. Oops. Nope. We'll delete that constraint because that went the wrong direction. So let's turn it more vertical. There we go. Now we'll hit it. There. And now that will be vertical. And then it's just a matter of stretching this where we need it. Looks like that's not working too well, so may have to go in and add a third point in there as well, but that's what I'm going to do. So the next step is going to be finishing the frame separation lines on the overhead and then tracing the deck outline as well. I'll be back when that's done. Okay, with the outline of the main deck overhead view completed, you now see that we have the profile view and the main deck view, forming the starboard half of our hull. So the next thing I'm going to do is to project this main deck line that I just traced so that it is even with the profile view main deck line as well. And you'll notice that it's not completely flat. There's a slight curve to the main deck here. So we're going to use a function called project include in order to match it up so that the line from the overhead view matches up perpendicular on the same plane with the main deck line. So to do that, we're going to create a new sketch, and it doesn't matter which plane you select. So I'm just going to pick the overhead view here for now. Okay. And we're going to start aft and work forward. So create, project include, just like you went to for project, but rather than using the project function, now we're going to be using the intersection curve function. And so the curve that we want to project is going to be the different line segments on the overhead view. So I'm just going to select this transom one, and I want that to align with here. And as you can see, what this does is creates a line where if you extended this line straight up and the profile line straight out, the line where those intersect is then drawn onto your drawing. Now when I do this as well, I'm going to make sure that projection link is off. And what this does is allows me to manipulate or change this line later on if I need to. And now that that's plotted, we right-click, repeat intersection curve, and again, select the next line segment. And see, everything is lining up nicely. All the lines are connected. Everything's coincident, which is what we want. And then I'm going to continue this process all the way down, and I'm also going to project include, or correction, intersection curve, the guidelines horizontally. So then those come out as well, so I can create a patch on the main deck area if I need to later on. So intersection curve is what we're doing. Again, I turned off the projection, or the link. I turned off the link projection so that I can change these later on if I need to. And I'll be back after that portion is complete. Okay, intersection curve has been projected all the way down. I will hide the main deck there. So now we have a nice curve going down the length of the main deck that matches up with the outline we have. And so the next step is going to be doing the individual frames themselves. So a little prep work to do before we get into tracing the frames, first of which is to create offset planes at each of the frame separation points. So I'm going to keep my profile view on, get rid of the main deck projection. So in order to do that, I want to create a plane at each of these points here so that I can copy and paste the frame drawing from the canvas, which you'll see later on. But to do that, all I'm going to do is come up here to the construct option, offset plane, and we're going to be building the plane on the XZ axis, so we're selecting this guy right here. And you can either select a specific distance if you want to measure out how far back they go, but for me, I think the easiest way to go is to come up here and select to object, and then you just go to the point where each of those frame separations are, and it builds an offset plane for you right there, just like that. But I'm going to build one. I also build one on the stern, the bow, and I'm going to add one right here, or let's see, turn on my profile view canvas. I'm also going to add a plane at this point here, the baseline where it intersects the bow, because I'm going to use that for this measurement here for when I build my separate sonar dome. So just going through that process next. So offset all the way there to the stern. I hit OK. And then you'll notice now the construction over here shows plane 1. And I'm just going to label that as stern. And then from there, right click, repeat offset plane, and select that one I just made. Going to object, and then I go to the next frame separation point. OK. And that's frame P. So I label it as such. Right click, repeat offset plane, to object, frame O. OK. And so I'm going to continue that process all the way down to the tip of the bow. All right, offset planes are now sketched from the stern all the way to the bow. I have them labeled according to the frame that they correspond to. You'll notice that when you build an offset plane off of a previous offset plane, they get progressively bigger in size. This won't make any difference to your sketches or anything moving forward. And if you don't like that, if you just create an offset plane and use the origin plane as your start point to offset from, it'll keep all of them the same size. So that's just an aesthetic thing that won't actually impact your model at all. So now I'll minimize these. And I'm going to use frame I plane to insert my frames canvas. So we go here to canvas, insert for my computer. Here's my whole pieces, and I'm going to put it on I. Okay, expand that out just a little bit so it's easier to see, so I can calibrate it. Okay, I'm going to hide my profile view canvas. And the reason I chose I is because it's the widest point here. So actually, first let's whole pieces edit. I'm going to flip that around so I can do the front pieces, and then I'll do the same thing for the back pieces. And I'm going to need to calibrate this. So what I've done is I've created this line that goes from the tip of the bow down to the keel. So I can use my inspect tool up here, hit that measure button, hit this line, 154.766. So I'm going to make a note of that. Close. I'll hide this profile view for now. Go ahead and hide this plane as well. There we go. And I'll hide the origin. Now I'm going to right click on my canvas and calibrate. And so again, going from the tip of the bow down to the keel, bottom, which is right here. There we go. And that's 154.766. Okay. So now we have that scaled to the rest of our drawing. Bring the profile view back up. And let's try and get this adjusted so that it's matched up. One thing I can do as well in order to help this is I'll start a sketch, and I'm going to make it on the plane that I have that canvas on. And then I'm going to press P for project, and I'm going to project that bow point and that keel point. Okay. And then I can hide this profile view. And so I know that I need to get this point matched up with that purple. So I'm going to right click the whole pieces canvas and edit canvas, and then we just start moving. That looks pretty close there. All right, and that is in the negative direction. So we'll go -5, too much, -3. Oh, that looks about right. Okay. Then we need to adjust the up as well. Up is in the positive direction, so we'll start with just 1. No, too much. 0.5, 6, 0.7, 0.8. That looks about right. Let's see how that looks on the bottom as well. Okay, let's try coming down just a little bit. The other thing I can do too is just, we can go inspect and we'll check between these two lines, make sure, okay, 154.766, that's the same. So we'll just try recalibrating this piece again. Here. To here. 154.766. Okay. So that's touching there. That looks centered there. We can still come down just a teeny bit. Edit. It's in the negative direction. Try coming down just -1. Too much. -0.5. 4, 3, 2. 0.2. All right, that looks lined up at the bottom. Let's check up here. That looks good. Okay, so now we know that we are lined up in the vertical plane. Now again, drawings won't necessarily always be perfectly to scale, so your frames might not match up to the edges we have. So in order to verify this, what I'm going to do is bring up my main deck projection here. And I'm going to project point I, because I'm lined up with frame I. So that's that point here. This is where the main deck should be touching at the edge. Hit OK, and then we'll hide that projection. So even though I know that I'm matched up scale-wise vertically here, it looks like this part is still out a little too wide. So what I'm going to do is I am going to right-click the hull pieces, and I'm going to edit the canvas, and then rather than using the movement arrows, I'm going to use the scaling arrows. So when I use the corner one, it scales in the X and Y direction uniformly. But this time I just want to scale in the horizontal direction here, the X direction. So we would need to make it smaller. Right now it's at 1. Let's try 0.98. 0.97. That looks pretty good right there. But we also need to re-verify to see if we're still lined up over here. Looks like we're good there. And down here, looks like we're good there too. So again, not perfect, but it looks a lot closer than it was. So we'll hit OK. And now, just to check, let's bring up H. So there's our main deck projection, and then we know that if this is I, H is the one right in front of it. So let's try projecting that point H. Okay, that looks good. And what happens if I project the next one too? Okay, again, not perfect, but these are looking a lot closer than what it would if I had just left it alone. So I'm going to go with this. Let's go cancel. I will leave that line up here that I projected. Turn off my main deck projection. So I'm going to be tracing frame I, and I'm going to be using these two projected points to make sure that, well, this is on the same plane that I is on, so the frame that I create here won't have to be copied and pasted to any of the other planes because it's already here. But for example, when I do H, I will trace from this point to, and again I'll project, just like I showed you, I will project that outermost point from H up here, and then I will trace the H frame between those two projected points. And so with that, I'm going to create an entire tracing of all of the forward frames. So I'm going to do that next, and then when that's completed, I'll show you how to transfer them over to each of their respective planes. Okay, frames are complete on the outline. As you can see, at one point, the lines didn't necessarily match up, so you just kind of go parallel and estimate it as best you can. But I know for a fact that when these get shifted to their respective planes, they are going to be coincident to the outline that I've created, which will make it easier to patch. One other thing that I want to note as well is that on these front two frames, A and B, where there is a point where, as you can see, the lines come out to create the sonar dome curves, I ignored those, and I just designed these frames to continue to map the flat tangent down here at the keel. So that way, when I go in, I'm going to separately create the sonar dome and merge that with the hull after it's made. And I'm hoping, because in the past when I've tried to do the outline to include that sonar dome shape, when you're patching or lofting between those frames, it kind of gives you a really funky shape that doesn't look like what you want it to look like. And also when you want to hollow out and shell the solid hull that you make to fit all your RC running gear in, it will take the computer forever to do it, because it's also trying to hollow out that complex sonar dome shape. So hopefully this makes it a bit simpler. Again, this is kind of an experiment that I'm doing, a little bit different from what I've done in the past, so we'll see if it works. But now we want to transfer all of these frames that we've created to each of their respective frame lines. So what I'll do is I will turn on my profile view canvas so that I can see all my labels. And then I know that these go from A to I. So I'm going to turn on the planes. Well, actually, I'll just do them one at a time. So I, we know, is already, the canvas is on I, so I is already there. So we can go ahead and hide that one for now. We'll start with H. Actually, for simplicity's sake, let's just start with A. So I'll turn on A. I'm going to, before I start a sketch there, I'm going to select my frame A, and I'm going to hit, oh, well, first I'll finish the sketch. All right, the sketch is finished. So selected frame A, Control C to copy, and then I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm going to select that plane for frame A, and I'm going to press Control V to paste. And now you'll see that that frame is pasted. Okay. And now we'll do the same thing for B. There's frame B. Come over to my frames picture here. Oh, I finished sketch. All right. So now we do frame B. So frame B is selected. Control C. Create sketch on plane B. Control V. And frame V is now pasted. Or frame B is now pasted. So as you can see, these frames are now perfectly aligned with the plane sections here. And if I turn on my main deck projection and my profile view, you can see that these frames are coincident with the main deck outline that I've drawn, and they come down and they're also touching the keel of everything that I created there. So this is going to help us later on when we're patching to try and make this hull whole. That's tough to say. So I'm going to continue this process on down all the way to H, or correction, I, where it's located here. And then I'm going to reverse my canvas, which I'll show you in another step. So for now, I'm just going to pause here. I'm going to place all the rest of the frames that I've drawn out so far, and then I'll come back. Okay, so the frames A through I have now been copied and pasted to each of their respective points. So you can take a look if you turn off your profile view, or you turn off your canvases there, and you can see, in fact, I can turn off my profile view sketch, and you can see we've got what looks like the beginning of a very nice hull. Half of it completed with the frames. Okay, so far so good. I'm very happy with that. So we will bring back our profile view there, bring back our hull pieces, and then we can hide those frames that we just copied and pasted. We need to keep our main deck projection. And for now, I'll hide the profile view as well. But now we need to do the aft frames, but because it's on the other side, we need to flip that around. So I'm going to right-click my hull pieces, edit canvas, and then this button right here, these little arrows are for flipping horizontally or vertically. So it's flipped there, and then I'll bring back my profile view, or correction, my profile view canvas, so I can take a look. Yeah, and as you can see, it looks like it's a bit off there. So I'm going to move it. 3, 4, 6. That looks about right. All right, we'll set it there for now. And then because I'm starting at J with the outside, I'm going to, there we go. All right, I'll turn my profile view sketch back on. I'm going to start a new sketch on the I plane where I had my other frames. I did the forward frames there, so I'll just start a new sketch for the aft frames here. There we go. And then I am going to, just like the last one, again, project. I'm going to find that intersection point along the main deck for frame J, which is the next one. So there's J. Here's where it comes out, and there's the intersection point there. And then I'll take a look at where that lands on my actual sketch plane. Looks a little bit higher. Let's take a look down here and see where it lines up. So it looks like it could possibly move up. Let's also go ahead and project where it meets the keel there. Take a look how that lines up with our canvas now. Okay. So yeah, that looks like that lines up pretty well. It's just the main deck is a little bit higher than what the drawing is, so we'll just compensate for that. And now for this one, I'm going to do that projection point for each of these, because as it starts to get aft here, these projection, or the keel line doesn't actually meet the keel. It may actually come up around this area here. So again, just like I did for frame J, I'm going to take projections of the point up here and then the point along the center line where it is, and then connect and just trace. And if it's not perfect, we're just going to kind of go parallel to what is on there and see if we can get it to work. So once I'm done with that, I'll come back and again repeat the process of copying and pasting the frames down to their respective planes. Frame tracing is complete. I now have all aft frames traced out. Again, as you can see, some of them were kind of close, but not necessarily right on.
but close enough for government work that I'm happy with it. So just like we did with the forward frames, we're now going to copy and paste each of these frames into their respective frame plane. Let me get that angle right. There we go. Into their respective frame plane on the profile view. So we get our profile view up. There we go. And we'll just start aft and work our way up to midship. So we've got P. So there's my P plane. Create sketch. And then we come over here to frame P, Control C, Control V. There it is. Okay. Finish sketch. Next is O. Create sketch. O. O. Control C. Control V. Okay. Finish sketch. So I'm going to continue this process until all of these frames are then copied and pasted into each of their frames. So I'll be back when that's done. Okay, all aft frames have now been copied and pasted, so we can take a look at those. I'll hide my canvases. I'll hide my aft frames. Labeled out last sketch. There we go. And then when you turn on all of the other frames and the main deck projection, those look like some pretty clean lines. I'm happy with how that came out. Now, the next thing that I've been thinking about how to solve is the transom, because we have the shape looking at it from the profile view, but the problem is I can't do an intersection curve from this line onto this one. So what I'm going to try and do is on the frame sketch, sometimes you'll get on the drawing, the frame sketch will actually have another last frame that's actually the transom itself. We don't have that, so what I'm going to do is just kind of have to estimate what that looks like. But first I need to take this canvas and I need to shift it back aft. So I'm going to hide this one. I'm going to construct an offset, or I don't need to construct an offset plane because I already have one. So I'm going to start a new sketch. Oh, there's my stern plane. So I'm going to start a new sketch on that stern plane. And then I'm going to project that bow point and the keel point. Okay. Finish sketch. Crap, I didn't want to double click. If you single click, pause, and then single click again, you can rename your sketch. So this one's going to be the transom. And now I'm going to bring my stern plane up again. And I'm going to construct or insert canvas from this computer. Going to do those hull pieces again. There. Okay. Make that a bit bigger. Keep it there for now. Okay. Now that's done, we will transom canvas. Right click and calibrate. And again, we go from here keel, which is here. And we said that was 154.766. So now we just need to right click, edit canvas, and move it up to our purple dots. That's the positive direction, okay. Zoom in to see, so we'll go 2, 3, 2.5, 2.8, 0.9, 3. Yeah, 3 looks good, but we do need to come up a bit more too. Up is positive direction, that's 1. Too much, we'll try 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.6 looks good. Check the bottom. Yep, that looks about right there too. Check that center line. Yep, I am happy with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to project, trying to get this corner piece. Well, actually, I want to take to where this part comes over. Okay. So I'm going to edit the overhead main deck sketch. I'm going to project this point down. Okay. And then I'm going to draw my line straight across. There. Okay. Finish sketch. Oops. And now I'm going to edit the main deck projection, and I'm going to create project include intersection curve, but I'm just going to do, well, I guess I'll do the entire line then. That line with here. There we go. Okay. Finish sketch. Now I'm going to edit my transom sketch. Oh. Finish sketch. Oh, that's right. Because I created the transom sketch before I put down the canvas, if I edit on the transom sketch, it won't allow me to see the canvas because it came after on the timeline, which is annoying. But I believe with the canvases, if you click and drag it in the timeline, it'll move it back. So now that it's behind that transom sketch, if I edit sketch, there we go. Now it's staying put. The timeline is a little tricky and annoying sometimes, but if you play around with it, you should be able to get it to do what you want. Project. Okay. And then we'll also project this point here. Okay. And then I want to project the point at the bottom as well, here. Okay. So now my plan is to hide this, and using these 3 projected points to create a basic curved shape for the transom. So between here and here, I'll just do a straight line. And between here and here, do a fit point spline. This one I know for a fact I will want to be horizontal. There we go. Escape. And I wonder what... Okay, yeah, I'm going to project this last frame onto here as well, just so I can look what it looks like compared to it. Okay, good with that. And now, just for sake of looking at it, I'm going to turn these frames off for now. There we go. So this is going to be my transom. It has to kind of match up with this back part here. I don't want it to go that far. You know what? Let's just call this one horizontal vertical as well. There we go. Okay. Okay. If I adjust this in or out, it kind of curves more back. Let's just go with that shape there. Now, if I'm thinking about this correctly in my head, when I turn off the transom canvas here, and I can get rid of this line now too. Delete, delete, delete. Get rid of these points as well. Start one more sketch. Oops. Again, you can do it on any plane. I'll just use this one for now. Okay, fingers crossed this works, because if not, I'm going to have to go back and re-edit this video and chop this entire part out. Create, project, include, intersection curve, this to here. Look at that. Okay. But now that that's there, let's hide this transom. This will be the transom projection. And it's going down, touching the end there. And let's just make sure that it, main deck projection. Okay. That all matches up. I am extremely happy with that. So, now we turn on all of our frames here. Oh, well, let's finish the sketch first. There we go. So now that we have that frame set, the frame's all set, as well as the transom, now we can start making some patches and closing this thing up, and hopefully, fingers crossed, if everything works out, we'll have a 3D shell of a warship hull. One thing I forgot to mention before I start working on the patches is the keel back here. So as you'll notice, this one frame doesn't actually come down to the keel line. It moves up because this is where the little fin on the back of the keel is created. So what I'm going to do is just create a line connecting the stern portion here straight down, and it may just be two. I'll see about either using a straight line or a fit point spline. See whatever fits the easiest, but it could be one of the two. But the other thing that I need to verify is if I do my profile view and I go to edit it, those points disappear. But I'm wondering if I copy this point here, Control C, and then I edit the profile view, Control V, well, it copied and pasted the point, but it wasn't where it was supposed to. Cancel. So again, this is where my ignorance with Fusion 360 and all of its finer details is going to come into play. But I have a plan again, because this is an issue with the timeline here. So what I'm going to do is get rid of that point because I don't need it. What I'm going to do is hide everything that I'm not using. The only thing I want to keep up right now is the profile sketch. Okay, so there's my profile sketch. I'm going to select this whole thing. I'm going to Control C. Now I'm going to hide it. I'm going to create another sketch and paste exactly where it was. And just to make sure that it does line up. Yep. Okay, finish sketch. This will be profile 2, and the reason that I'm doing this is so that I can now project. I don't know why that's copying to. Now that last frame there I'll edit this. So all I did was copy this sketch and paste it into a new one that's now further down the timeline. So everything that I did prior to it, I can apply to it, such as projecting this point from frame M to now create a connection point between here and here, going through that point. So let's take a look at if a fit point spline is the best to use for that and what that looks like. Okay. I don't want that dropping down, so I'm going to lock this tangent with that curve there. Okay, that looks pretty straight. I'm happy with that, but I want this to be its own piece as well, so I'm going to modify break. Breaks that point right there. So now this is separate, and I can use both of those pieces when I create the patch. Finish sketch. Okay, so now when I begin building the hull, I'm going to be doing it now using this profile, and then I'll just leave this one hidden from view. One quick correction to make as well before going into the patching is that I forgot to break the transom back here, so that when I go to patch the actual transom, you'll see that this line extends beyond that intersection point. So I'm going to edit my main deck projection sketch. I'm going to use modify break and make sure that breaks at that point. Finish sketch. And I notice that because before I start recording, I like to go through and make sure everything's going to work so that I avoid looking like an idiot in the middle of doing what I'm doing. So I'm going to go back to, again, attempting to connect everything together and hopefully get everything smoothed out in such a way that I can then explain it in a quick and efficient manner. All right, I ran into another error that I need to correct before moving on, and that was in this area right here. I believe it's frame L. So this line needs to be broken up so that I can patch this individual box and this little triangle kind of piece right here as well. Now, because that piece is already projected, it's going to be a little difficult. So what I'm going to have to do is to first edit the profile view, edit sketch, modify. I'm going to break there. So now these three separate pieces are there. Okay, that's good. I'm going to finish that sketch. And then I have to do the same thing with the main deck projection. I'm going to edit sketch. I'm going to bring back my overhead main deck's already there. Okay, so I'm going to delete that piece. And then I am going to create, project include, intersection curve, this piece with this one. Okay, repeat, this piece with this one. Okay, repeat, same piece, last curve. Okay, and now each of those are a separate piece. Now we're good to go. Finish sketch. Okay, I'm going to continue the lofting. If I run into anything else, I'll come back and make a correction before we move on to forming the hull. So one other correction that needs to be made, as I found as I was trying to patch this all together, is that the patch does not like when there are line segments. It likes a single continuous curve. So what I'm going to have to do here is to delete this portion. I'm going to go in and edit the sketch, and based on the line that I'm looking at in the drawing, it looks like just a single straight line connecting these 2 points will fit. And we'll finish the sketch there, and since that's good, we'll have to go back into our projection main deck projection, edit sketch, and then we'll bring back our overhead, create, project include, intersection curve, and this portion align with, oops. Oh, we need to be able to see the profile view. There we go. So this portion align with oh, it's because I did that to profile 2, and profile 2 is not there. So profile 1 then. There we go. See, that's why the timeline can be a little confusing sometimes. Edit sketch. So again, same process, but just connecting that point to that point. Finish. Edit. I don't like how it automatically moves you to the plane that you're working on, but deal with it. All right, and then we're going to create, project include, intersection curve, that main deck overhead, align there, and now that's a single curve. Okay, finish sketch, and that's going to work a lot better. So after a lot of trial and error, I think I finally found a way that is replicable
so that it can be repeated. It's a repeatable process that can be done for all of the holes I'm going to do now. Now that I know how to do this, this is the way I'm going to do all of them moving forward. So before I started recording, I was going through making sure that the vision and idea I had in my head was actually, I could actually do it. So then instead of just trying it while I was recording and then failing miserably and having to delete it and come back, I wanted to find something that works. And so this entire time, my plan was to create a patch and then thicken it to, ultimately, I want my hull to be 2 millimeters thick uniformly. So I was going to create a surface patch, and then up here under solid and surface, I was going to use surface to loft a patch between the frames and then thicken them to 2 millimeters. However, that fails when you get up like here in the bow area or here back in the transom and the stern, uh, because if there's points that overlap each other or intersect when you're trying to do this thicken, Fusion 360 doesn't like it. So then I also looked at doing a solid loft between the transom and the frames, and then using the rails as guides and trying to use the shell function. But again, because of the curvature, the shell function won't work unless the thickness is like 5 or 6 millimeters, which is more than I wanted to, which is bigger than I wanted it to be, because ultimately I plan on 3D printing this, and that's just more plastic that would be wasted. So I was trying to think of a way to make the hull thinner. So this is how I'm going to do this. Again, I'm going to be using the Surface tab. I'm going to create a loft, and I'm going to use a combination of my hull outline, the projection I made for the main deck, and then the frames that I also modeled. So for the loft, I'm just going to pick a line on one side and then one on the other. So this is the transom. Oh, because I was doing this as well, you'll notice that over here, the tangent edges, you have merge or you have keep. So to prevent the different pieces, because I noticed that if you have it in merge rather than keep, as you're looking at the from the bottom up or top down, you'll see that it kind of gets this bubbly effect between the frames, which we don't want. We want everything to be smooth. I don't know the exact technical description behind why it does that, but I just noticed that if you select keep, that it doesn't do that. So that's what we're going to do. It then also gives you these little lines here that you can use to adjust the curvature as you see fit. But so we've lofted, we have this surface here, this patch, but you'll notice that it's also going straight between those 2 points, and it's not actually matching the curvature. So what we're going to do is click rails, we're going to add a rail, and we're going to use this as the guide. So now all of the edges are touching exactly where I want them to based on the outline of what I have. Then again, we can adjust the curvature with this line here to what we think looks about right. So I'm just going to make that even with the water line like that. And that's good. Okay. Well, that gave me an error. I haven't seen that error before, so let's try that one more time. Here, here, and here. Here. Maybe it just didn't like where I had my profile line there. Okay, third time's a charm. This time I'm not going to adjust that line. I'm just going to leave it where it is. Let's see if that works. There we go. Okay, that's what it was. So it didn't like where I had adjusted that line to. That's fine. I'm just going to keep it there then. I'm going to right click, repeat loft, and again I'm going to repeat this process down the entirety of the ship, selecting the edges of the previous frame and moving to the edges of the next one. I'm going to select my rails. I'm going to do the edges up top and then along the keel. So the outer edges of the main deck and then the keel line as well. Don't get discouraged if you click and all of a sudden you see
rail misses profile and they show you the little red dots, all that means is that, remember, because we know for a fact that we've split this up so that all of these lines are touching the main deck projection. So it just means you have a little chunk that you haven't selected. And once you do, there it is. So I'm happy with that. Oops. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Now this one I'm going to just adjust again. Kind of make sure all those line up. Those are parallel. Rail 1. Oh, I need rail 2 as well. Add the keel. There we go. Okay. And now we are moving right along. And this problem also solves the issue I was having with the loft where the bow would look like this and there was this crazy gap in there that wasn't supposed to be, but defining the rails is what I needed to do in order to make sure that it all matched up. Rail 2. Just check what the curvature does here. Don't want that. That should work. Okay. And so now you have a surface patch, so this has no depth to it. This is essentially a 0 width length sheet, but you can see the basic shape and outline of your ship. A couple of things that I forgot to point out. One, again, the front of the hull shape here looks a little weird and it's very flat right there, but that's okay because this is actually where the sonar dome is going to cover up. So we created it this way just to be easier to model for right now, and so that our sonar dome will look better than if we were to include it as part of the actual hull as we were shaping it. Also, in the back, this square, I need to patch this square up, so I'm going to loft between here and here, and then okay. So that will give us a good there. I like that. And then I'm also going to patch the top because my plan is to have my entire hull enclosed rather than making a separate removable top deck. I'm going to model holes in the top deck that will be covered by the superstructure to be able to get down to the running gear inside, but I want the top deck to print with the rest of the hull as well, as opposed to having to then connect it with magnets or pins or however you want to do it. My plan is to make the hull complete on the top as well, which means I'm going to have to repeat this patching process for the gaps up here, which means I need a line to connect these 2 points. So there's a couple of different ways I could do this. I could go back to my overhead view and project a couple of these points down, but the easiest way, what I think is gonna be the lazy way, I'm just gonna go to my main deck projection here, and I'm going to edit sketch. I'm gonna activate my profile view, and then I'm going to actually activate the 3D sketch option here at the bottom, and I'm going to select a line, and I'm just going to connect those 2 points, 1 and 2. Finish sketch. So now I have that line connecting there. Oh, actually I need to go back and, because I need one below it as well. One and 2. And I'm going to unselect my 3D sketch and finish sketch. Okay, now that this is done, the next thing I want to do is to ensure that all of this is a single piece to work with, as opposed to having to work with the numerous bodies over here that have been created. So I'm going to hide all of my sketches, and then I'm just going to select all these pieces, and then I'm going to pick the stitch option up here, which will now connect each of those different panels that I made into a single editable body. Now that we have this entire hull stitched together as one piece, I'll show you what I was talking about earlier. So in a perfect world, this should be able to work. If you go to Create Thicken, you can select a face, and then like I said, I wanted mine to be 2 millimeters thick. So see, I select that, and then it thickens it perpendicular to the face itself, so that my planes are still matching up, and this is exactly how thick I want it to be. However, this doesn't work because when you try and do it back here, where there's a lot more complex curves, again, it just goes bad. So to try and make it as uniform as possible, instead of just having a bunch of hull sections that are different thicknesses, what I'm going to do is to right click my body, and I'm going to copy, then I will right click again, and I will paste. And I will leave it there for now. Okay, so now I have 2 of the exact same body. See, they're interchangeable. And what I'm going to do is to slightly shrink this second copy, and then I'm going to shift it right. Well, I'm going to shift it inside and up so that it creates an air gap between itself and the larger one. So again, like I said, I'll bring up my sketches here. And what I've done is to measure out the center line between the bow and the stern, which came to right about here, this line. And I drew a line straight up. So this is where I'm going to make my reference point for when I scale it down. So we're going to modify scale. I'm scaling that copy that I made. The point I'm going to use is this center point here that I created. And it doesn't have to be very much. I was using 0.99. See, that gave me a bit of a difference there. That might actually be too much. Let's try 0.998. Let's see what that does. There we go. But there's still not too much of a gap there, but that's to be expected. So
.998, scaled down just a bit. Say OK. And now I'm going to modify, move, copy. Again, I'm going to select that body. And then I'm just going to move it. Let's see, so that's the negative direction. Let's try -1. We'll go -2. -2. And then we will go up 2. So now I have a slightly smaller version. And what you can see is I've now got this air gap between these two surfaces, which is what I want. Now let's just measure that, see how wide it is. There and there. 2.994, so almost 3 millimeters, but I'll take it. Oh, actually, we can fix that. We'll just go back. We'll go to right click and edit feature from our move. And it was at -2. Let's see if what happens when we do -1.5 and 1.5. Does that bring us closer to 2? .5. So maybe we just need to go 1 then. Right click, edit feature. 1, 1. And again, this will be completely up to you how much you want to change it, how big a difference you want to make, based on how thick you want your hull to be. Ooh, that's not enough at all. Oh, that's why, because that one's supposed to be -1. There we go. Okay. Inspect. What's the difference between? Let's check the stern as well, see what that looks like between the transoms. .134. Okay, I'm happy with that. Close. And then how about down here? .601. A little thinner. Okay, with the front, I want to come up just slightly higher. 1.6. I'd like it to be closer to 2. So again, I'm just measuring the different areas, measuring that air gap. 1, let's come up 1.4. Okay. And that now changes that thickness to 0.929. Feature. Just come up 1.5. And take one more look. Perfect. Okay, now I have the gap between the inner hull here and the outer hull, which is what I wanted. And depending on what your preference is, I'm going to, just to make sure that everything lines up, I want to trim the excess, because you can see that the center plane right here is the, what axis is that? That's the y-axis. So this plane right here along the y-axis splits my ship right down the middle. And now this inner hull is hanging over because I moved it. So I'm going to hide the outer hull, modify, split body, body to split. Just going to be this one, splitting tools, and I'm just going to select that plane. I'm going to hit OK. And that's done. I'll hide my sketches. And when you come in to look, you'll see that now there are it trimmed off that chunk of section right there, which is the one that I want to get rid of. So you can right click and then I hit remove. You can delete it as well, but sometimes you get a little bit of an error message and it gets weird on you. So if you just hit the right click on it and hit remove, it takes it away but doesn't fully delete it so that it doesn't mess with, I don't know, the algorithm. And then we're going to repeat that process, modify, but this time we're going to use our profile view, hide the outer, hide the outer, modify, split body. We're doing the same one, that inner hull, but this time the cutting tool, the splitting tool, and we'll have to do it twice because we have to do this chunk and then the chunk back here, but it's going to be the main deck line. And all you do is work your way down, selecting each portion of that main deck. Well, you know what? We can. What happens if I turn that off? There we go. So now you see it's trimming off just that little piece of excess up along the top there so that it will be even with the outer hull. And now we hit OK. And it gave me an error. All right, so I'm going to have to explore this error a little bit, but you get the idea of what you need to do. So I'm going to go and I'm going to trim that little bit off the top here, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I finally fixed my mistakes, and I was able to get that trimmed up. So now you can see that the inner and outer hull are now matched up perfectly along the planes there, along the main deck line, and now we just have this hollow space that we need to make not hollow and turn into a hull. So the way we're going to do that is we're now going to go over to our solid workspace, and we are going to create a loft. And we can hide the inner body for now, and we're just going to do this patch by patch. So you select the first part that you want to loft. Oop, that's not going to work. Yeah, we're going to have to do it one at a time. And then you select the inner body, and you select the point you want to loft to. Hit OK. And now you'll see that air gap between the two hulls is now being filled by a solid body, which you see here. And it's going to be a tedious process, but at the end, I'm hoping, I say hope because I haven't actually gone through and done this yet, I hope it will give us the half of the hull that we want that can then be mirrored and attached. So that's what I'm going to do next. Happy lofting. I realized when I edited the last chunk that I didn't really give a good view of lofting on down the lines, so I'll just show a couple more examples before cutting off again until I finish. But all I'm doing is hiding the inner hull. So now you can see the sections that I've lofted together. create loft. I'm selecting the first face, and then I'm bringing the inner hull back and selecting the same face to loft 2. I'm selecting join and then hitting OK. And then I'm repeating that process. Right click, repeat loft, this portion, inner hull, same one, join, OK. So that's how the lofting process is going on down the line. Okay, so we have finished lofting between the outer and inner hull shells that we created. So if I turn those off, you will see we are now left with a solid body that isn't necessarily uniformly thick. I wanted a uniform thickness of 2 millimeters, but since I couldn't find an efficient way to do that, I found a less efficient way to get it close enough. So I'm happy with the result and how that looks. And the next step I'm going to do is to create the main deck itself. So again, when I'm going to print this, I'm going to have my main deck be attached to the hull form as opposed to having a separate removable main deck, because I'm going to cut holes in the top that will be covered by the superstructure to give access to the running gear inside. So to do that, I'm going to turn on my sketches. I'm going to turn off the hull body. And the profile and main deck projection are the only two I need, because just like we did the hull, we're going to now do surface lofting between the main deck. So create loft, select your first frame and then the end there, and then we'll put in our guide rails. One, and now we've created a patch that covers up the main deck, and I'm going to continue this process, just working my way down the line, just like I did with the hull when I made the hull shell. And as you can see, it's a little bit easier because it's just the top part, so you don't have any weird shapes like the stern or the transom or up towards the bow. I don't know why the colors change between green and yellow for the different sides. I found that it doesn't change anything. It just doesn't look uniform, which is weird, but it doesn't matter because we're going to make a solid surface out of this later anyway. So I'll be back after this is done. Now we have our main deck surfaces patched, so I'm going to stitch together the separate patches. Let me hide my sketches here to make it easier to see. I'm going to sketch together these patches to turn them into one body, just like I did with the hull. There. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the step down here. So now we should just be left with those. Perfect. Okay, so my initial plan was to take the bodies that I just created for the main deck and thicken either the entire thing or each individual panel, but a couple of them get hung up because they're not perfectly flat. So thicken doesn't work, press pull doesn't work. So I'm going to take a page out of the hull book that I just used, and rather than messing with each of these individually, I'm going to take the entire body itself. I'm going to use the move copy option, or let's go back to surface. So I've selected that body, modify, move copy, and then I'm going to create a copy, select the translate, -2. Oops, but I want to create a copy. So now I've translated that down too, which gives us a thickness of 2 millimeters. Okay, right click, repeat, move copy. Going to do that with this one. Create a copy, moving it down -2. Okay. That being done, I can hide this guy right. That one can be hidden for now. And then I'm just going to solid create loft between the bodies. Let's see if it'll let me do it as a single piece.
though it doesn't look like it will. Can I select multiple? Nope, that won't work. Okay, so I am going to have to go through and loft just the individual panels themselves. Okay, repeat loft, 1, 2. And then we'll work our way down the rest of the main deck. So I'll be back when that's done. Okay, now that we have our main deck lofted at 2 millimeters thick, if you unhide the hull, you'll notice that there's a little bit of an overhang. So we're going to need to trim that. So in order to do this, I'm going to use the combine feature. I'm going to want to cut. The target body is going to be my main deck. The tool body will be the hull. And when I tested this earlier, there was a little bit of a delay. So depending on how complex your shape is, it may take your computer a second to kind of run through the numbers. So there we go. Now the hull has trimmed the main deck. And I'm going to keep tools because I don't want my hull to disappear after I've completed this cut. It looks like it's taken it a second again. Okay. Okay, and it looks like that worked. So we'll hide the hull there, and we'll hide the main deck. And I'm going to label these so they're easier to see. Main deck. This one is the hull. All right, and as you can see, it left some trimmings off to the side there. So those I can right-click and remove. Right-click, remove. So now I've got my hull. And when we take a look at the main deck, it should be cut nice and flush, going all the way down the hull, which is exactly what we want. Now at this point, if you intend to keep the deck separate from the hull, you wouldn't join this together. And you can just keep that separate and then mirror the hull and mirror the deck. But because I'm going to be printing the top of my deck along with the hull, I'm going to combine the hull and the main deck, and I'm going to join them. Well, looks like it's giving me some errors, so I'm going to have to work with it some more. But that's okay. The other thing we can do is finally get this thing looking like it's supposed to. So we're going to come up to Create Mirror. The objects we're going to select are our hull and our main deck. Because we've built this all touching against the ZY plane, we're going to mirror it over that plane. We're going to make sure the join option is selected, and we're going to hit OK. And look at that. We now have a completed main deck and the completed hull in the middle. Now, of course, this isn't taking into account the sonar dome, which I plan on modeling separately, or also the stern. Let's see, turn on my sketches. The keel fin here, which is just a matter of extruding that. So I'll do that next, but look how nice our hull looks. I'm very happy with that. I'm very happy with this process so far. And like I said, this is the process I intend on using moving forward until somebody tells me of a newer, better one that might be slightly easier and less time consuming. Uh, but I'm happy with the accuracy of this and hope you are too. Um, the next clip, then, I'll go ahead and finish off the keel fin and the sonar dome and kind of give you a quick walkthrough of how I did those, but I need to play around with it first to figure out exactly how I'm going to do it. Okay, so I finished modeling the dome. It is separate from the hull, and for some reason I can't get it to join. I was going to go back and include how I did this, but honestly, it was with a hope and a prayer and a bunch of buttons. It's still not perfect the shape that I want, but it's close enough that I'm going to call it. Um, I may do another video later on specifically on how to model the sonar dome, but for now, I'm just going to call that one good. However, I will show you how to do the fin keel here. So I'm going to bring up my profile view, and this one should, knock on wood, be easier. But here's where we have the fin. So what I like to do is to just extrude the fin. And maybe bring it out about 3 millimeters or so. And that should work. So it'll be a total of 6. But I don't want it to join quite yet, so I'm going to hide the hull. So there's half of it. Okay. And then I like to use the fillet function. And just round that off. And then repeat. Actually, you know what? For that one, we're not going to fill it. We're going to use the camphor. Let's see if it'll work because it's curved. It might not like that. Nope, it doesn't like that. Okay, so just kidding. We will just use the fillet. We'll make this round it off like this. Yep, I'm happy with that. Okay, and then we're going to mirror it. So create, mirror. That's the body, mirror plane. Join, okay. And then we'll bring the hull back and take a look. And it looks like, because I just want to verify that it's not overhanging. Yeah, you can see that there's a little bit of a gap in there. So what I'm going to do is press pull. That's not working either. All right, well, if all else fails, we could just move the entire thing. So we'll bring the hull back. Navigate down to where we can see that gap. Okay, and we'll try going up 1. Oh, that went up really far. 0.5. So it looks like if we come up just 0.2. Nope, okay. 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8. One. So if we come up 1 millimeter, it looks like now we have gone through. Okay.
All right. So it looks like everything is now joining properly. I'm going to hit OK, and then I am going to combine the hull and the keel fin. And now it is done. Of course, I still have to do rudders and the shafts and everything, but this video was strictly to do the hull, so I think I'm going to end it here, and I'll go through and edit it and share it. Hopefully you learned something and it helped you out. Again, I apologize for the amateurish quality of this, but I am no professional YouTuber. Just wanted to make a video to help out my fellow modeling friends, and hopefully this will get you to where you need to go so you can print your own ship. Thanks for joining me, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I will try to answer them as best that I can. Thanks.